everybody, today we're going to take a look at some voter registration data, and generally what we're going to see is the movement in favor of the Republican Party, except things might have changed since Kamala Harris has gotten into the race for the Dems. So we'll look at a few states in depth, then we'll take a look at some swing states as well as some random states overall. So first of all, voter registration. Different states have different ways that they report the numbers, so we can't get the same data for every state at the same time. But overall, nationwide, Democrats have had an advantage for a long time. Part of that is going to be because of legacy Democrats, where they actually vote Republican, but they're still officially registered as Democrats, but also unaffiliated voters. That's another thing that's been rising in recent times. So voter registration is not everything, that's for sure. But if it does indicate enthusiasm, we can start right here on New York Times. And they single out two states, North Carolina and Pennsylvania. Both of those are in the swing state category, and each side claimed one in 2020. So this first table is North Carolina, and you can see in weekly voter registration data going back to February of this year, Republicans have had the lead in every single week. Sometimes it's very narrow, sometimes it's substantial. In the recent 3 weeks, though, it's flipped and Democrats have taken the lead. Of course, that's because Biden stepped aside and Harris is now in the driver's seat. So Democrats had a burst of enthusiasm. It's too soon to say if it's going to last, but it does give Democrats some hope, especially in a state that they lost last time, like in North Carolina. But even if you look at these recent 3 weeks, that really only puts a small dent in the advantage for the GOP over the prior 6 or 7 months. Next in Pennsylvania, which Biden won last time. There, going back to February, you can see that Republicans generally had a small advantage during most weeks, but there were a few that Democrats had the edge. There was a big surge for the Republicans the week of that convention. It was also the same time during the Trump assassination attempt, which took place in Pennsylvania. But after that, we see something similar to North Carolina. It's Democrats that have had a surge over the past 3 weeks. So the way I look at this is there's a great storyline for each side. Republicans can generally say they've had the lead most of the year, if not all of the year in the case of North Carolina. Plus, they had a big boost for their convention, so they're feeling pretty great. However, Democrats can come back and say that's old news. Now that we've got Harris in there, we've seen a recent surge, and that's going to continue through the convention and then hopefully all the way into November. Neither side is technically wrong, and it's easiest to get hung up on whatever happened most recently, in this case, the surge for the Dems. But regardless of which party is leading in voter registration each week, I think it has little bearing on which way the state is going to vote. A lot of voters are registered, but there's plenty that are not going to show up to the polls. Some voters are registered with each party, but they might vote for the opposite party in the actual election. And plus, third-party vote is the other big thing to keep in mind. So I think there's some interesting data here, but I don't personally put a whole lot of stock into it. I think it's all about the longer trends, and then comparing that to the actual results. Now, we'll get to some other states in just a minute, but another relevant state to point out that made some headlines recently is in Florida. And the headline here is Florida now counts 1 million more registered Republican voters than Democrats. If you go down here, you can see it's 5.3 million to 4.3 million. And then there's another 3.9 million that don't affiliate with either party. Now, given that is a significant advantage, and the trends have kind of maintained in that direction for quite some time, and once you combine that with some of the recent results we've seen, I think Republicans do have much more reason to be optimistic in this state than Democrats. But no matter what the data shows, both sides are almost never going to concede that their party is in any danger in a given state. So now that we've done that, we can get on X/Twitter and take a look at some slides of a bunch of different states. And this is not my own work. This is from Michael Pruser, who is from Decision Desk HQ. So we'll assume that somebody else has accurately compiled the data, and we've got some good visuals here. Let's start in North Carolina, and this is for the month of August. And we can see Trump won the state in 2020 by 1.3. Democrats overall maintain a 133,000 vote advantage. The total party registration is 7.5 million. Republicans are closer to 2.3 million. Democrats are at about 2.4. Unaffiliated or other voters are all the way up there at 2.9 million. Now, the key things to take a look at are going to be the changes from July. Republican Party has gone up over 6,000. Democratic Party has dropped more than 700. And then other has surged way up to about 23,000. And then the long-term data is down below. You can see Democrats had an advantage of 276,000. In the last presidential election, the advantage was even more stark. Democrats were up 391,000. So if you look at the multi-year trends, Democrats have clearly been on the decline. Republicans and unaffiliated voters have been increasing. And even with Republicans already trailing in registration in the state in 2020, Trump still won the state by over 1%. So on the surface, it might seem like it should be even better for the Republicans. But keep in mind, since Harris got into the race, Democrats have had a boost. That might continue. And regardless of who has the advantage, it doesn't necessarily correlate with which side is going to win in November. So let's go a little quicker through the rest of these states. Here's Pennsylvania, the other state we took a look at a moment ago. Biden won it by over 1% in 2020. The advantage for Democrats here is over 350,000. 30,000. But the change from July is Republicans are up over 21,000, Democrats up almost 5,800, and other is up over 18,000. And the advantage for Democrats has consistently diminished here since 2020. It was at 685,000 in 2020. Let's look at another state. We've got Arizona. This had been known as a red state up until Biden flipped it in 2020. And even though he won it, you can see Republicans have an advantage of 259,000. And since April, they've gained almost 20,000. Democrats, almost 3,500. Again, other is up over 27,000. And even though the state has shifted toward the left, the advantage for Republicans has pretty much doubled since 2020, where it was at only 130,000. So it's another great example to show you where party affiliation does not necessarily show you who's going to win the state. You always want to see your side gain voters, but I would not obsess too much about the individual numbers. How about in Nevada? Democrats have an advantage of 29,000. Republicans have gained more since July. And going back to 2020, the advantage for the Democrats has dwindled from 86,700. Now, what about some other states? Here's Iowa. This one has both parties losing voters. Since July, Republicans lost 57, Democrats over 1,400. Other has gained almost 3,800. The Republican advantage here is 133,000. In 2020, it was only 22,300. So another fairly significant shift toward the GOP. How about the most populous state, California? It's a blue state. Democrats have a massive advantage here of 4.8 million. Republicans actually did all the gaining here, over 94,000. Democrats lost almost 44,000. The advantage for Democrats is also lower now than what it was in 2020. Republicans are probably thinking that's great news, but until they can maintain more consistent success in the state, again, the registration data is not really all that important. How about their neighbor to the north, Oregon? This one has Democrats having more of an advantage than Republicans. It's about a 2-to-1 ratio, with Democrats at over 3,600, Republicans at 1,350. But that's just a change from the previous month. If you go back to 4 years ago, the advantage for Democrats is about 30,000 less. How about neighboring Idaho? That's a very red state. Republicans have an advantage of 476,000. Since July, they've gained over 2,400. Democrats have gained over 1,600. And if you go back to 2020, the Republican advantage was at 390,000. So another pretty good shift there toward the right. How about maybe an even redder state, West Virginia? This is a state that does have a lot of legacy or ancestral Democrats. So the Republican Party advantage here is only 130,000. Republicans have a net gain here of 2,800. Democrats have a net loss of 1,400 since July. And if you go back to 2020, it was actually Democrats that had the party registration advantage. So even though this is an extremely red state, when it comes to that affiliation, it was not that long ago that Democrats actually had the advantage on paper. Now, how about Kansas, a state that might be trending toward the left? Republicans have the advantage here of 381,000. Since July, Republicans have gained 3,400, Democrats have gained 1,400. And compared to 2022 as well as 2020, the advantage for the GOP has increased by about 21,000. How about Alaska, a state that has unusual party affiliation? Since July, Republicans have gained over 300 more than the Democrats, but other is up almost 800. The statewide GOP advantage is over 70,000. 4 years ago, it was at about 67,000. Now, what about some of the bluer states? Let's go to the East Coast and look at New Jersey. Since July, it's overwhelming here for the Republicans. They're over 7,100, while Democrats are at about 1,000. And the statewide advantage, though, is heavy for the Democrats. It's over 923,000. But Democrats and other have almost the same amount of registration. But since 2020, the advantage for Democrats has come down about 150,000. Another state with a lot of independents is going to be Colorado. Both parties lost huge here. Republicans about 9,000. Democrats over 12,000. Even this time, other went down 18,500. So a massive decline across the board for voter registration. Overall, Democrats do have an advantage of 100,000. And it's almost exactly the same as where it was in November of 2020. Now, we can't look at every state, but we've got a few more. Let's do Rhode Island. This is a blue state, but since July, Republicans have gone down 120, while Democrats have gone down more than 2,600. The total advantage for the Dems is at 172,000, and that is much lower than the 222,000 that it was back in November of 2020. Let's do another red state in the Deep South. We've got Louisiana. Here, Democrats actually still have the advantage at about 99,000. From July, Republicans are up 6,300, Democrats down 1,100. The advantage for the Democrats was about 2.5 times higher in November of 2020, when it was at about 249,000. So this also goes to show that even though Democrats have the advantage here, this is easily considered a red state. And let's finish it up with New Mexico. Here, the statewide advantage for the Democrats is at 160,000. Since July, Republicans have gained 1,200, Democrats have lost almost 600, other is up about 1,900, and 4 years ago, Democrats had the advantage of about 185,000. So that's a scattered mix of a bunch of different states. We'll finish it up here with another table from Michael Pruser, and as always, the links will be down below below in the description. But that's a look at some of the recent changes with voter registration. I think it's something to take a look at, but clearly you can't put a lot of weight on it. Too many times we've seen momentum in one direction, but that doesn't necessarily pan out for the general election. Basically, in every state, Republicans have a net gain of voters. And you can see overall in the states that are in this table, Democrats still have the clear-cut advantage overall. GOP is at 30.5, Democrats at 37.7. Some people put more weight on it than others. I think it all depends on the degree of the change and if that change is going to continue. We saw Democrats have a burst after Biden stepped aside. That might continue, it might not, but regardless of what happens, I would not get too excited or too worried either way. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about any of this data? Is it great for Republicans because they seem to have gained in pretty much every state? Or is it great for Democrats because now with Harris in there and the convention, she's going to turn it around? Or does it not matter either way because this has little to do with how people are actually going to vote? And what do you think about the rise of the unaffiliated voter? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join if you'd like to help support the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.